Good morning. My name is Tanya Selseth, and I am the Public Affairs Officer at the United States Embassy to the Holy See. Thank you very much for joining us here today for Women Religious on the Front Lines, a joint symposium of the U.S. Embassy to the Holy See, the Union for International Superiors General, and Solidarity for South Sudan. We are honored to see so many friends and colleagues with us here this morning. I'd like to extend a special welcome to our ambassadors and members of the diplomatic corps from nearly 20 countries that are here with us this morning. In our audience, we also have representatives from Holy See dicasteries, the Vatican Press Corps, pontifical universities, NGOs, lay groups, students, and of course, last but very certainly not least, we are very pleased to welcome Women Religious from a number of different congregations. Sisters, thank you so much for being with us here today. Sisters, all of us are here this morning to hear your stories of courage, of conviction, of sacrifice, of service, as told by the incredible lineup of speakers, of panelists that we will hear from today. Before we kick off this morning's program, just a few small housekeeping items. First, if I could kindly ask if everyone that has a cell phone, if you could just mute it or put it on silent or turn it off. Secondly, we will have a coffee break between our two panels. We are on a very tight schedule, so if you can please make sure to be back after the break on time, we would be very appreciative. We are taking photos and videos during this event, so if you don't want to be filmed or have your photo in social media, please let the photographer or the videographer know. And at the end of the symposium, we will be having a light lunch, so I hope you can all join us to continue the conversation. Finally, please think of this symposium as a dialogue. As you'll see, we've designed the panels to give you, as audience members, a chance to ask questions of our panelists and participate in the discussion. This is a conversation among colleagues and friends about how we can best empower and collaborate with Women Religious to make even greater progress on very difficult, complex problems in some of the world's most difficult places. I would now like to introduce our first speaker, United States Ambassador to the Holy See, Callista Gingrich. Ambassador Gingrich previously served as President and CEO of Gingrich Productions, a multimedia production and consulting company in Arlington, Virginia. She is the author of the New York Times bestselling Ellis the Elephant children's series and co-author of Rediscovering God in America. She's produced several historical and public policy documentary films and sung for 2 decades with the choir of the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in Washington, D.C. She previously served as a congressional aide in the U.S. House of Representatives and as the president of the Gingrich Foundation. Ave Maria Law School in Naples, Florida, most recently honored Ambassador Gingrich with an honorary doctorate in 2018. Please join me in welcoming the United States Ambassador to the Holy See, Callista Gingrich.
Thank you. Good morning, members of the clergy, sisters, members of the diplomatic community, and friends. I am pleased to welcome you as we recognize the extraordinary contributions of women religious on the front lines. I am especially grateful to Sister Patricia Murray and her dedicated staff at the UISG for co-hosting this symposium. The United States Embassy to the Holy See has been a longtime friend and supporter of the UISG and its work. I'd also like to thank Sister Judith Pereira Rico and Solidarity with South Sudan for collaborating with us today. We appreciate your dedication to the tireless pursuit of peace. And finally, I'm honored that we'll be joined by His Excellency Archbishop Paul Gallagher, the Vatican Secretary for Relations with States. We are here today to recognize and celebrate women religious, often the unsung heroes of the Catholic Church. Women religious are the last beacon of hope for millions of people suffering from famine, disease, and conflict. They serve the displaced and the desperate, frequently at the risk of personal harm. They work in countries like South Sudan and Syria, where governments have failed and humanitarian organizations struggle to operate. They also play a critical role in the global fight against human trafficking, a cause close to my heart. When I recently visited the Ursuline Sisters in Caserta at Casa Root, I saw firsthand how Women Religious provide support and dignity to victims of human trafficking. Over 400 survivors of this horrific crime, including Blessing Okwadian, one of our distinguished panelists today, have found refuge at Casa Root. Too often, the work of Women Religious is underappreciated and unnoticed. It is my hope that this symposium will illustrate the remarkable contributions women religious make to advance peace and human rights around the world. I am honored that we are joined today by Sister Maria Elena Barini. For over 4 decades, Sister Barini has served in war-torn communities in Africa, first in Chad and now in the Central African Republic. For the last 10 years, Sister Barini has performed astonishing acts of charity from her mission in Bokaranga, demonstrating courage, grace, and compassion. During the worst periods of violence, when aid organizations recalled their staff and embassies evacuated their citizens, Sister Barini remained. When armed militants entered her mission in 2014, she told them, "I am here. Kill me. I am not afraid." As the group ransacked the mission, Sister Barini sent the youngest sisters and the villagers into the hills and stayed behind to help a woman give birth. Sister Barini's incredible devotion to human dignity is born out of her faithful desire to serve. Her cause is peace, and her devotion is unconditional. Sister Barini is one of the many inspiring women religious in this room and around the world who work tirelessly to advance human dignity and freedom. Women religious are the educators, entrepreneurs, and humanitarians on the front lines. Their service and sacrifice should be emulated and celebrated. The United States Embassy to the Holy See will continue to shine a bright light on women religious and their extraordinary achievements. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador, for your remarks. As the Ambassador mentioned, the U.S. Embassy to the Holy See has been a longtime friend and supporter of the UISG and its incredible work around the world. We have also been longtime admirers of our next speaker, Sister Patricia Murray. In a former life, Sister Patricia Murray was a high school teacher and a peace education officer in Ireland. From 2009 to 2014, she was the Executive Director of Solidarity with South Sudan. Since 2014, Sister Murray has served as Executive Secretary of the International Union of Superiors General, or UISG. The great passions that animate her life and ministry are consecrated life, justice, peace, and education. Please give a round of applause for Sister Pat Murray.
Good morning, everybody. It's my great pleasure to welcome Ambassador Gingrich and the staff of the U.S. Embassy to the Holy See, together with many ambassadors and members of the Diplomatic Corps. And later we'll be welcoming His Excellency Archbishop Paul Gallagher, the Holy See's Secretary of Relations with States. And we're very pleased to have Father Henry Limoncello, who's representing the Congregation for Institutes of Consecrated Life and Societies of Apostolic Life, and all of you invited guests here to the UISG. We're here to celebrate women religious on the front lines and to pay a special tribute to Sister Maria Elena Barini, who's receiving the International Women of Courage Award. As sisters on the front line, our faith is in God and our love of humanity. They're our source and inspiration for our living and our work. The UISG represents almost 2,000 leaders of female congregations worldwide. That probably adds up to about 800,000 women religious. And we all belong to various congregations, but we belong to a long line of courageous women in each of our congregations who for centuries have been leaving home and crossing seas, deserts, mountains, and vast plains to reach those most in need, and particularly those most abandoned. Today, more than ever, we are answering the call of the Church and hearing the words of Pope Francis when he encourages religious women and men to leave our nests, go to the frontiers, go out on the streets, go to the places where no one else would dare to go. We know that where one of us is, all of us are. We support one another with our prayer and our long support within congregations and across congregations. We bring the charisms of our different congregations and our personal gifts and abilities to those who often feel lost and abandoned. I remember so clearly the people in South Sudan saying, "We know that no matter how difficult or how dangerous the situation is, you will never leave us." So we see a testimony of the importance of presence in the person of Sister Maria Elena, who stayed in the Central African Republic and was a refuge there for all who were fleeing from the unrest. She's a symbol of the thousands of women religious and also men religious who stay among the people at the most difficult and demanding of times because of their passion for Christ and their passion for humanity. This is the vocation of being a religious, to be a loving presence in the heart of the world. As St. Teresa of Calcutta said, we are not called to be successful, we are called to be faithful. This is a prophetic witness, a prophetic presence. At the heart, through all the changes, religious life remains a life radically committed to incarnating the gospel here and now, living the Beatitudes and bringing the love of God to ever new frontiers. Today, this morning, we'll hear about those new frontiers, where people are trafficked, where people are seeking a better life, fleeing war and famine and poverty. We're being faithful, being present to those who suffer. We're listening and discerning, hearing the calls and the cries of people and trying to answer their needs. Again, I would like to conclude by quoting a line from the Cameroonian Liturgy of the Saints. It says beautifully, "O my sisters, stand very firm and see what the Lord can do." Today, we remember with gratitude the women and the men religious, together with many lay people who have stood firm, who are standing firm, so that God's love is made present and people are given hope and the means to live the fullness of life which is promised by the Lord in the gospel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sister Pat, for your remarks and for welcoming us all to the UISG today. We look forward to many more years of friendship and collaboration between the U.S. Embassy to the Holy See and the UISG. Now I'd like to introduce you to Father Henry Limoncelli. Father Limoncelli was born in Peckville, Pennsylvania, which I looked up yesterday has a population of around 5,000, I think. But he was raised in Buffalo, New York, about 250,000, so a little more people. He is an alumnus of the Pontifical Gregorian University here in Rome and was ordained a priest in 1979. Like Sister Pat, he too also served as a high school teacher in a past life before becoming the Dean of Oblate College in Washington, D.C., and the Director of Formation for the Eastern American Province. Since 1999, Father Limoncelli has worked in the Vatican Congregation for Institutes of Consecrated Life and Societies of Apostolic Life. I got it, it's very long. Please give a warm welcome to Father Limoncelli.
Madam Ambassador, members of the Embassy to the Holy See, other diplomats, Sister Pat and all of you members of UISG, and members of Solidarity with South Sudan, sisters, fathers, and guests, it's my pleasure to be here with you today. First of all, I bring you greetings and best wishes from our Cardinal Prefect, Cardinal Jean Braz de Avis, and our Archbishop Secretary, Jose Rodriguez Carballo, neither of whom could be here today and accept this invitation. However, I don't regret that because I have the opportunity to come. It is truly a pleasure to be here to honor sisters because sisters deserve to be honored. You really do. And in preparing my remarks today, I have two separate areas. First of all, some of my memories with sisters as a young child and as a youth and in my years of ministry in the United States. Sisters have played a big role in my life. I had the Grey Nuns of the Sacred Heart in grammar school, and in my ministry I worked closely with members of other congregations in schools and in parishes, and they were always inspiring. One of my greatest mentors in life has been Sister Sharon Holland, who many of you know. And there are so many other sisters who have touched my life. Some of the childhood memories I have of sisters is one of my first experiences of prayer being prayed heartily and being answered happened when I was 7 years old on the eve of entering second grade. I prayed that I would not get Sister Leo Marie. We had two of each class. And I asked the Lord, please, Lord, don't give me Sister Leo Marie because she was supposed to be mean. I was in the school grounds that day, and they called the roster for Sister Leo Marie's class, and I wasn't there. And then they introduced this beautiful, wonderful young sister, Sister Daniel Marie, and I knew I was in her class. Thank you, Lord. Next, I remember on my way to high school passing the convent and hearing the sisters chant morning prayer. How inspiring that was. I remember talking with my cousins about our nuns are better than your nuns. Ours had a better habit too. Another memory is Sister's cupboard that held many wonderful things. It was always interesting to see Sister go to her cupboard to watch what she would pull out of it at any moment. And another of the memories that's inspiring is the trunk room. I remember in the convent there was the trunk room where sisters had their trunks because they were ready to go at any given moment. And many of them found out the same day that the people found out that they were leaving. And many of them took assignments that they really didn't want to have. And we thank you for that. I've been at the Vatican Congregation for 19 years. I thought I was coming to work in the Vatican for 6. It's turned into almost 19 now. And a good deal of my work there is reading periodic reports from sisters' congregations. Okay? And I want to point out 6 things that have really inspired me in reading these reports. Number 1, sisters' commitment to prayer. to privileged moments with the Lord, to hear the Lord speaking to them in their heart and inspiring them to carry out their mission. Secondly, sisters' ability to discern the most urgent needs and to respond to them, and without fear. The third is their love of the poor and their outreach to the poor. We talked in the Vatican Council about preferential option for the poor, and the sisters surely took that seriously, and they continue to take that seriously. Fourth is their courage and daring. Sisters run in where angels fear to tread, and they will do anything. And I'm amazed at how much they can do. Their ability to work long and hard. Fifthly, their trust in divine providence, knowing that the Lord is with them and trusting that he will guide them and inspire their work. The sixth is their perseverance in mission. Today we're going to hear about women doing wonderful things in mission, sticking with it, staying there with it, staying with the people, being of the people. I want to thank you all, sisters, for all you do. I want to encourage you to continue to witness to who you are and to what you do. Thank you for your work. And lastly, I would like to challenge young sisters to look to those who have gone before you and try to be like them. God bless you all.
I believe most of you, or many of you in this room, already know the grace and the force that is Philippa Hitchen. So rather than read you her bio, which you all have in your program booklet, I'll simply say that when I met Philippa 2 years ago, I was very struck by her vibrant personality and her very easy way of making complex subjects relatable and relevant. Philippa always knows how to put interview subjects at ease, and she's an absolute delight to be seated next to at a lunch or dinner. She intuitively understands how to connect with people, a skill honed through her many decades of interviews and hundreds of conversations both inside and outside the Vatican walls, some even held at thousands of miles above Earth in the Papal Plain. As one of the Vatican's most seasoned and talented journalists, I can't think of a better person to moderate our first panel. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Philippa Hitchen.
Thank you for that glowing introduction. I'd like to thank Ambassador Gingrich and indeed all of the US Embassy staff.
The empowerment of women is a major pillar of US Embassy policy. And I was particularly pleased
to be asked to be part of this seminar on women religious on the front lines, because as pretty much everyone so far has said, women religious are just among the most inspiring people I have also personally met and worked with during more than 30 years at Vatican Radio, now the Secretariat for Communications. In 2010, a top New York Times journalist wrote about women religious, and in particular about the deeply inspiring witness that he had seen during a visit to what was still southern Sudan before the independence referendum. He said, "I am awed that so many of the selfless people serving the world's neediest are lowly nuns and priests, notable not for the grandeur of their vestments, but for the grandness of their compassion. The Vatican certainly supports many charitable efforts, and some bishops and cardinals are exemplary, but overwhelmingly it's at the grassroots that I find the great soul of the Catholic Church." Every now and then, of course, some of the stories from the grassroots do make the news headlines. Sister Maria Elena Berini, who we'll be hearing from, is one of those examples of women who are recognized for their courageous, compassionate, selfless work on the front lines. But mostly that work goes on quietly, far from the media spotlight, where women are serving the most deprived and needy communities. As one of today's panelists put it to me when we were preparing for the seminar, as consecrated sisters, we don't give birth, but we give life wherever it's most needed. And one of the areas where religious sisters have been truly life-giving and prophetic in their service to those most in need has been their work to combat slavery and human trafficking. Over 2 decades ago, I was privileged to meet an Italian sister working with trafficked women at that time, when many church leaders, and indeed most of society, saw trafficked victims as criminals. They were prostitutes, they were illegals, rather than victims of crime, vulnerable people in need of protection and support. I'm sure many of you know her. I don't know whether she's here today. Her name is Eugenia Bonetti, and she was the person who introduced me to this issue, which I've been passionate about ever since. But she was just one of many pioneering sisters who saw this work as their calling and realized the potential of their own religious networks to tackle this global and growing phenomenon of human trafficking. As a result of that pioneering work, a decade ago, Talitha Kum was founded as an international network of consecrated life against trafficking. It's now active in over 70 countries worldwide. Our first panelist, Sister Gabriella Bottani, is the coordinator of Talitha Kum. She's a Comboni missionary who's worked extensively in Latin America, in particular as part of an anti-trafficking effort for the Brazilian Conference of Religious, including some high-profile work around the 2014 World Cup in Brazil. Sister Gabriella, why don't you start by telling us just briefly about you and yourself and your work with Talitha Kum?
Yeah, thank you for the invitation, for being here representing thousands of sisters worldwide committed against trafficking. My experience and the approach I had with human trafficking was sharing my life first in Islam, in Fortaleza, and then in Amazonia. So it was a very important experience for me because I could see the reality of trafficking from the perspective of, let me say, the source country and not the destination where we are used to staying here in Italy. And specifically in Amazonia, it was very important for me to see, I can't say the culture because it's a culture of exploitation, where people and natural resources are important only because of the money they produce and they can give. So it was very important for me to understand trafficking. And mostly of our network, of the Talitha Kum network, are based in the source countries, the biggest one. I would like to quote something of the manual of Talitha Kum, that it is a very important element for us, because trafficking, we speak about slavery, and it's really much more. We can consider it as the indicator of human relationship, civil, political, economic, cultural, and social in the age of the globalization. So trafficking in person is like a tip of the iceberg that is helping us to understanding that something is not going on correctly, something is wrong, that we have to change really the complex reality if we want to give dignity to people that are today enslaved. And we are speaking about a million of people in this situation.
Thank you, Sister Gabriella. Our second panelist today is Sister Cecile Espinilla. She's the coordinator of Talitha Kum in the Philippines, a Dominican sister of St. Catherine of Siena, in charge of justice, peace, and integrity of creation for her congregation. She has several degrees in business and theology and educational management, and believe it or not, started working in a bank before she heard God's call to her to serve the poor. She's worked with them for many years now, but the poorest communities. She's also worked with decision makers at the UN to keep this crucial issue on the agenda. Sister Cecile, if you'd like to tell us just briefly in a few words about your work.
Good morning. I'm Sister Cecilia. I'm from the Philippines, and I am currently the international promoter of Justice, Peace, and Integrity of Creation, or we call JPAC, of the Dominican Sisters International. So I had been involved in this human trafficking because I was in the school for 30 years, so I don't know what was happening in the world until I got into this and I sat down in a forum and I heard about how women and girls were trafficked, violated, and abused. And I said, oh my God. And I told myself, I'll put my energy and my focus on this advocacy, especially when I began talking to girls, rescued, cuddling, 1-year-old rescued from human trafficking, 3 years old, 6 years old. And in fact, the youngest that was rescued from cyber pornography was just 2 months old. It was horrible for me. That's why in the Dominican Sisters International, we organized the Dominican International Network Against Human Trafficking. And this is what I would like to strengthen and mobilize, because the Dominican Sisters are in 110 countries in the world, and we are 147 congregations with more than 20,000 sisters. So we have really an energy to mobilize, and then hopefully we could tap this so we can fight human trafficking. And this is the commitment of Religious. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for that introduction. This is an issue which clearly touches the heart in a very particular way. And we're next going to hear from somebody who has been touched in a very personal way by this problem. Blessing Okeidon, originally from Nigeria, a degree in computer sciences, but she was lured to Italy with the promise of a job and forced into prostitution by her traffickers. Today she's a survivor, and she talks about escaping with the help of the Ursuline sisters at Casa Ruth in Caserta. She's also written a book called The Courage of Freedom. We're very glad to have you with us today, Blessing, and we salute you for the extraordinary work that you're doing to help people understand exactly what this problem is about. If you'd just like to say a few words to start the conversation off. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm a survivor. Yes, you heard me. I'm a survivor. And I'm actually happy to be here and also to let people know about my story. Because telling your story is powerful, and it brings healing. And it also empowers other people. I'm in Nigeria. Nigeria is a country that has a lot of challenges. And human trafficking is one of the challenges that has, in recent times, objectified women, men, and children, and also make them very, very vulnerable. Human traffickers actually take advantage of the economical situation of the country to traffic people. I'm here to represent both the victims and the survivor. I work as a cultural mediator. Anytime I go to the street for outreach, I feel trafficked again whenever I see many Nigerian young women on the street. Anytime my phone rings and hearing the voice of a girl that is crying, I just need to escape. I feel trafficked again. And I kept asking myself this question. When will this be a story and a history? How can one put a stop to this? Many children from rural communities are prey to human traffickers. A girl once told me that the day she was taken away from her parents' house, she was very happy because she was told that she was going to work as a babysitter and also to go to school in the city. But when she arrived in the city, she was taken to Libya, and there she was made to prostitute. And she was just 13 years old. Then, when she was 17, they transferred her to Italy. Then she told me, when I told her, don't you think you can live a better life? She said, you just lied. Because there is no better life for the poor. Children that are conditioned to have the mentality that they are born to be slaves. She said she doesn't know when she will be free one day, but she hoped to be free. I'm happy today that this same girl was helped and rescued by a religious sister, Sister Rita, and today she's working and she's enjoying her freedom. I'm really, really very, very happy to share my story and also to empower other people. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you, Blessing. I think it's impossible not to be moved by your words and by your witness, the work that you're doing today for other women who have been through the same traumatic story, the same traumatic experience that you have. I'd like to come back to this title of Women Working on the Front Lines in Trafficking. And I'd like to perhaps ask you, Sister Gabriella, why do you think it is that so many women have seen today that this is, for them, the front line? This is really where they're called to be, because it is a relatively new area of work. As we were saying, a few decades ago, nobody talked about it as a problem, and yet you have people literally in countries around the world working on this issue. What is it, perhaps, that most of all makes them want to take up this area of ministry?
I think that this proximity that we are living our life in proximity with the God, listening His word, but listening His word together with the people, sharing our life in many reality all around the world, in the outskirts of the city, with people in situation of vulnerabilities, with poor people in war situation, where the insecurity and the violence are quite strong. This attitude is helping us in recognizing where life and human life is in need for being supported in order to rescue their own dignity. So I think that these two elements, our spirituality and charisms, And this proximity with the people is the most important. And from this situation, we are able to recognize the real need of the people. And also, because of this, many congregations that were still working against slavery since centuries. Most of us were working with women in situation of violence, of vulnerabilities. Many of us were working or living together with migrants, so the risk person in situation of trafficking, and we were able to detect these needs.
So it's really, for many sisters, a reclaiming of their original charism for which their congregations were founded in a modern context.
Yes, of course. I think that is a new, the reality is changing and also reproducing some elements. So I'm sure that trafficking is one of these inequality, is inequity, that injustice that it was in the past and it is now. We call it new slavery, but it was slavery also in the past. But the framework is the globalization framework. So the way also of thinking, our charism, and the way of acting in this context as religious women is moving forward. But the problem is the same, how we can really give dignity to the people, because they are, for us, our brothers and sisters.
And another issue, of course, is how to coordinate all the work that is going on, because so many women are now involved in this, and yet you said to me coordination is perhaps one of the hardest challenges, because there are many conflicting interests among other parties working on this work, in this area.
Yeah, I was very touched once when one of the person working strong on trafficking is Helga Conrad. She was a former ministry for the pari opportunità of the equal opportunities of the Austrian government. She told me, the people can say you or not, but there are many interests in working against trafficking. And once I learned, when I know the sister, you have only one interest, and it is to be close to the survivor and to the people that they are really in need. So I was really struggled, and I was questioned, what is really this kind of different of interest? And maybe it's true, she has more experience of being in this international context, but what I experienced in this time is that collaboration, partnership, what we call networking, is not only one way. It is a very important strategy if we want really to reduce and to give new life for victims of trafficking, but also to try to move forward and to reduce the root causes, so the causes of trafficking. We have to collaborate, we have to listen each other really, and to try to make a step back and to try to give voice of what is going on, of the suffering of the people, to try to make a step back of our interest and to see what is the common good that we need to work together.
Sister Cecilia, you're working, as you say, very much in the source countries, in the Asian context there. On this question of prevention, why do you think, or what can women religious do in a particular way to work on this crucial question of prevention?
Okay, a good number of sisters are really embedded in communities, especially in local communities, and a lot of them also are doing mission in impoverished community where vulnerability of victims is very high. So we do a lot of massive information campaign in schools, universities, colleges, both public and public schools, Muslims, everyone in the community. And also, we also give information campaign even to government offices. And personally, I do to offices, especially with men, because I see the demand high on men, especially on sexual exploitation. Also, some sisters are in poor communities, and they take that opportunity already to inform and educate the poor about the modus operandi of traffickers. So somehow it empowers them to fight and protect their community about trafficking. A lot of things are being done by the sisters on the ground, really. One of the things that it's good is because the sisters, the people tend to really trust the sisters, they're religious, and so they're able to talk to them. And also, the sisters are doing, especially in the schools, they do information to the schools, and in fact, we have organized clubs, like chapters in the school, clubs on human trafficking, so that the young people will be involved about this. And we also coordinate with the government. We work with government on human trafficking, NGOs, we really partner with them because we believe no single organization, no matter how good, can really do it alone. It has to be with partners, with other groups. And this is where we religious are very strong. We really want to work together to fight human trafficking. This is our calling.
I'd like to pick up on that point about education and ask you, Blessing, how much did you know, if at all, about the problem of trafficking? Were you aware of the problem? Had you been educated at all about it when you were lured here to Italy?
When you were in Nigeria, okay. I always say that I can't say that I was actually ignorant of the existence of trafficking. I know that it exists. I read journals, television, they talk about it, in the radio they talk about it, about human trafficking. But the way I was being trafficked was very, very different, because the woman, a Christian woman that trafficked me, never give me any benefit of doubt, because everything was in place, documents were in place. Then I was not really having any benefit of doubt of finishing up in the hands of traffickers, or doing in contrary to what I thought or what I was told that I would come to the country to do. But I can say that most of the victims that are here in Italy that I've met, many of them, they are from the rural communities. Then when we're talking about the rural community in a developing country, then we should also reason and figure out a place where there is no electricity, a place where there are no good roads, a place where there are no good education, good schools, where there are dilapidated school buildings, where the teachers are not always common. Then many of them, they don't really have access to this education, because many of them, as I'm still speaking today, there are so many people from the rural area that have never heard of human trafficking.
So the work of the sisters is extraordinarily important still, despite all the work that has already been done. Why don't you tell us a bit about the sisters that you met, the Ursuline sisters, who helped you to escape from your traffickers?
Okay. I just said just now that I was trafficked by Christian women, and I thank God who used a Christian woman to help me to regain my dignity. I can vividly remember in 2013 when the police brought me to Ruth's house at Cassetta. I was discouraged. I was not actually happy, because I was already betrayed by a Christian woman who I really trusted. Then bringing me to the house of religious women again, I really wanted to accept it. I told them that I want to go back. That it's better I sleep on the streets than to be than to have anything to do with any Christian woman. Then the police actually asked me to stay for a night. But when this Sister Rita, when she came, and other sisters, the approach she used, the way she was speaking with me, the way she was talking to me, I was just listening to her. But within me, I was thinking that I only just have a night here. I just want to spend the night the next day that I was getting up, because I was full of anger. I was confused. I was asking myself, how can a Christian woman do this? Because I know this woman. Then I was thinking of, how can a Christian woman think of destroying the life of another woman, or the life of another daughter of another woman? How can it be possible? How can a Christian woman just think of exploiting to enrich herself with the life of another? How can people just pretend that way in the church? Then I was just thinking about all those in their house. Then the next day I met other women, other Nigerian women, children. They were telling me really their stories, which were similar. Then it was not strange to me anymore, because some of them were trafficked by their mother, sister, their auntie. Some of them were trafficked by their uncle. Some of them were trafficked by their relatives. Then by family members. Then it was not strange to me anymore if this woman that I knew in the church could traffic me, but she is not my relation. But if there is somebody that could traffic the relation, therefore me, trafficking is normal. Therefore me, it can happen to anybody. Because when I was in Nigeria, whenever they talk about trafficking, I never think that it will happen to me. If anybody should tell me then that it was going to happen to me, I would say yes, it's a lie. It can't happen, because I was working. I have my own business. I do my own personal thing. I was not on the streets. Then why should somebody come and confuse me? But I never knew that they apply different strategies in trafficking people. Then when I got there, the Sister Rita knew that I was actually full of pain, full of wound, that I actually need healings. But she actually helped me in the healing process. She helped me in the healing process. Then I regained my healing. Then I regained this strength. I regained my lost dignity. When you're talking about victims, talking about survival, it's not just enough to rescue. It's not just enough to rescue them. But what is very important is providing the survivors, providing them the essential needs, what they need to exploit their potential, the conducive environment, the knowledge, things that they need to experience, to go through, to exploit their potentials, because they have it in them. But these potentials, their knowledge remain dormant because of that wound, because of that injury, because of that psychological trauma that they have gone through, emotional trauma that they have gone through. Thank you.
Can I ask Sister Gabriella, Sister Cecilia, there are many people, many organizations working on healing for victims, survivors of trafficking. What is it that sisters can bring in a particular way that perhaps others can't?
According to the experience of Talita Kum, what we are bringing is this in the healing process, and I think that Blessing is telling her experience is a holistic way of bringing this healing to people that are deeply wounded. So all the elements of our humanity, but also the spirituality is very important in this process. And it is an ongoing process. From the healing, is not only the healing inside of the person, but the healing process in again in a society. So people are helped also to reorganize their own life with the income generation project. So it's not only the internal healing, but it's also this relationship healing, and also to help people to, again, be part of a society with dignity. Having a new work, because most of the people are re-trafficked because they are not able to have new possibilities in their life, and the percentage is really very high. There are many people that are rescued from sexual exploitation, also adolescents, but they return and they are re-trafficked again because we are not able to offer to them new opportunities. So the healing process is inclusive, including also these kind of elements.
As you say, it's a very complex problem. It's not as simple as helping someone off the streets, because they're always at high risk again unless the conditions are right to help them reintegrate into society. Sister Cecilia, you said how important it is to work closely alongside other partners in the field, many other organizations, including police and law enforcement. Can you just tell us a little bit about what the sisters are doing in that Asian context there to protect victims and to try and make sure that they're not vulnerable to the traffickers once again?
Okay. So in the shelters, especially run by religious, they are given some procedures about healing, reintegration, so that they'll be able to go back to their communities. And also, very delicately, sometimes I call them victims, and they tell me, don't call us victims, call us survivors, which is true. Because when you call them victims, it's like everything is down. But when you tell they are survivors, it means they're able to rise up. So they tell us, these survivors, we delicately help them in the court proceedings, because court proceedings is sometimes difficult, especially for these people. So this is where we coordinate with law enforcement and tell them to be very delicate in dealing with questions, because sometimes they can be so personal in questioning, like where were you touched, all those things. And it's like re-trafficking these survivors. So we ask in relation with law enforcement to be very delicate in proceedings, especially in court proceedings. And we also ask court people, if possible, never put these survivors before the traffickers. It really traumatizes them, especially the children, to see their traffickers again. So those are the things that we delicately help. And of course, what Sister said earlier, the prayer. We find the prayer a very powerful tool, really, for reintegration and to bring them back to that idea that they are human beings with dignity, that they are capable to dream again, to see the future again. So those are the things that we religious put together. As what Sister said, it's comprehensive. To put them back as a human being. And as they said, we are survivors, not victims.
You have many years' experience now through the Talitakum network, working in so many different countries. How can this wealth of experience, this very particular type of work that you're doing from a very particular focused perspective, how can this work be more effectively, if you like, incorporated into the policies, not just of the police and law enforcement, but more broadly into government policies to try and really tackle this at the root, to really try and make a difference in stamping out the problem of trafficking?
One of the strategies that we are trying to develop and we are working with is to empower sisters at the grassroots to get in touch with their own government and to start a dialogue with them. So, through a dialogue, because we do not have one reality throughout the world, we are in 76 countries, But what it is important is to establish the dialogue and the sharing with also governmental organizations. And something is going on. The U.S. Catholic Sisters are in touch with the U.S. government in Australia, ACRAT. They are in dialogue also with the Australian government, the sisters in Nigeria. They are also connected with the NATIP, the organization working in Nigeria, and in many other countries. I brought only 3 as an example. I think that it is an ongoing process, starting from the grassroots, but I'm sure that we have to improve more how the knowledge the sisters are developing and producing, also throughout the experience we have, how we can bring it better also for the well of everybody, and also to support the reflection of governmental organizations. This is something that we are still in dialogue and we are trying to improve.
What kind of changes would you like to see, if you like, from government level? I mean, is your voice really being listened to, or is it seen sometimes as interesting experience, but not necessarily the kind of thing that can directly lead to changes in policy?
Oh, I think that maybe one of the most... there are 2 elements that... but it is, in this case, I will bring my opinion with, of course, the experience of Talitha Kum. First, that survivors of trafficking, they have the responsibilities yet to show that they are victim of trafficking. So their witness and the way, if they denounce or not, is still a main point to be recognized in many places. And this is a huge responsibility for a survivor of trafficking, that in many cases they are afraid to denounce, for example. But how we can work more with the intelligence, like to bring these responsibilities as government. I think that it is a very important point. The other elements, when we speak about trafficking and migration, where people were trafficked from one country to another, so maybe is the question of the deportation. People are deported back, and we have sisters working in the receiving country when they return, and many of them were victims of trafficking. I do not want to bring concrete example, but I think that all of us, we know about some situation from many parts of the world, and in this case, how we can work better in order to protect and to support also survivors of trafficking in this healing process. Also, when they are not, let me use a word that I prefer to say undocumented migrants. In some places, they are called as illegal migrants. But this is another point that maybe could be a space of dialogue with the government.
What about at the level of church leadership? We're hearing from the sisters' extraordinary experiences, the wealth of experience in so many countries. As I mentioned at the beginning, a few decades ago, there were very few church leaders who would stand up and speak publicly about this. A lot has changed today from what I see, from my perspective, but I'm interested to hear from you. Do you feel supported by the church leadership in the work that you do? And what changes would you like to see?
I would like to say that we are church, and we are women leaders in the church, and that's...
I should have used the word hierarchy. You're absolutely right. You're leaders for all of us. I mean the hierarchy.
We have really different experience, but of course there is a very interesting work together. In many places, sisters started, and they were the person able also to lobbying or to be advocate in the diocese. And in many places, we have now a church committee under the Bishop Conference, and the Talitha Kum network are part of them. So we are growing as in collaboration inside of the church. So we have a very positive, not only with Pope Francis, also before, since the Vatican Council II, the church has committed against trafficking, also the popes before Francis, but of course with Pope Francis there was a stronger commitment from side of the church. But I can say it could be better. We are improving and we are still struggling and working, but I can say we have a very positive collaboration on this issue.
Certainly Pope Francis has taken up this as one of the priorities almost of his pontificate, calling it a crime against humanity. Blessing, you have had an encounter, a close-up personal encounter, haven't you, with Pope Francis to talk about your experience. Can you just share some of that with us, what he said to you?
I was actually impressed to have gotten a very wonderful response from the Pope. When I asked the question about how the church can actually help to create awareness, especially to the men who are declined, then the response was very, very wonderful. And it was very, very encouraging. And I hope that they effect such a response in the church. Because the majority of the men of the clients are Catholic, are Christians. I can say that they are Christian majority. But the issue is for them to be able to convey the message to them, because I believe that they know that all these women, they are victims. Because a child that's supposed to be in the school and 30 years old child on the street cannot just voluntarily want to be on the street. I believe somebody should think that there is something behind that. And going to such a child means that person is wicked. It means wickedness. Well, I was really very, very happy about the response of the Pope and his hope to every women that are victims of human trafficking.
The Pope called it a sick criminal mentality, didn't he? He spoke very clearly about what is perhaps, in a sense, the elephant in the room over this issue, because we talk so much about protecting survivors, about prosecuting the traffickers, but we don't talk so much about the clients, the men, as you say, the Christian men, fathers of families, who are using and exploiting and then throwing away these women on the streets. Sister, what else do you think church, if you like, the hierarchy, the men in the church, let's put it that way, what else can they do, perhaps, to really tackle this other side of the issue?
Of course, we're happy that in the pontificate of Pope Francis, this is one of the priorities. And so we are actually one with the Pope in this priority. And I would, from my opinion, probably our church people could help more, especially our hierarchy, could help more in this work. But it's there, but we have just to probably move them some more. I think the religious women, because we are at the forefront of this, somehow we are able to influence them in their decision, especially when addressing justice and peace issues. If they could also include this, especially because a lot of victims, especially on sexual exploitation, are really men and boys. I'm sorry for the men here, but it's really a concern for us, you know, because there is that kind of mentality, culturally and socially, that women are second class, that women are of no value or less value at all. So I hope our men sector could educate our people. You know, I do this whenever we give anti-human trafficking, to always remind is not just the boys, but the students. And you know, whenever I say, every time you touch on the website of pornography and cybersex, you are adding to the demand side of human trafficking. And you know, I could hear the buzz sound. And I said, oh my God, these young people have really seen is pornography and cybersex. So there is really for all of us to pay attention to re-educate our young people, especially our men and boys, that women are not for sale. We have a special dignity, and they have to respect. We are not second class. We are one with them. There is no humanity without women. No? So we have a special role in this world. Religious cannot give birth, as was said, but we can give life. And this is what we would like to do. Give life to humanity, that no man is second class. No human being is second class. We are all special in the eyes of God, because each one of us is made in the image and likeness of God. And that is that kind of sacredness that we have to teach our people. Respect each other, because we are sacred. Okay, so I think more has to be done on the aspect of re-educating our men, both in the church, the government, even in families.
Can I ask... Can I ask all three of you about the hope that you have at this present time? Because there is an enormous amount of work being done today. This issue, which was nowhere on the political agenda a few decades ago, is now right up at the top of the agenda at the United Nations, in government policies, and yet the figures seem to keep on growing. And in one sense, this might be very depressing for the work that you're doing, that it seems still like a drop in the ocean, that you're not really turning the tide. Can I ask you where you personally draw hope from as you continue this battle? Blessing.
And I know that human trafficking is a long-time story. It's just that in recent times, many people are now very, very much involved in recent times. I believe that right now I'm very, very happy, because on the 9th of March, the Oba of Benin City, one of the states where there are a lot of victims, called all the traditional rulers and all the traditional priests, and he made them to revoke the oaths that most of the girls took with them, which they actually did on that day. And this one is a part of freedom for most of the women that came from that particular region. Okay, I believe with this one is something that can help those women from that region that are here, that are in Europe country, that are in Asia country, that can give them freedom. I believe this one will also pose fear on the traffickers, because the traffickers always believe on voodoo, on juju. Then since the traditional priests, since the juju priests, all of them, they have stood on the ground to revoke these oaths and their practice. I believe that is a weak point also for the traffickers. Most of them that believe on the voodoo. Then, and also, I believe that other states, other regions in Nigeria can also learn from this, as in coming together with all the traditional rulers, coming together to do the same thing, to also liberate other women from other regions. Because in Europe country, in Asia country, in other countries, it's not only people from the Edo region that are victims. There are victims from different regions. Then, yes, it's a freedom for the Benin people, for the Edo people, but it will also help the anti-trafficking movement to stand on the ground, to help to tell the Oba of Benin to also call other traditional rulers together to do the same thing that he just did to help his own people.
So some small steps, but very significant steps from the African context. What about you, sister, in Asia? What progress, very briefly, do you see, and where do you get your hope from?
Okay, I think what we need to do, especially religious, is to keep talking about this. I hope that when you leave this room, you keep quiet and say, oh, they'll do it. I think each one of us should be responsible, and probably I could announce now that on April 18, the Justice and Peace Commission of UISG will have a seminar on human trafficking at La Salle. So I hope to see all of you there, including Ambassador. Okay, I would like to conclude, especially my work. The United Nations identified 4 P's to respond to human trafficking. We have prevention, protection, prosecution, and partnership. We added one important P. What do you think is that P for religious? Prayer. Great. We added the 5th P, prayer. We believe that we need this. This is an indispensable element when we fight human trafficking. Because in human trafficking, we are not fighting just a syndicate. We're fighting evil itself, whose only mission is to destroy human dignity. And also, prayer helps in the rescue operation. Sometimes I get a text message at 10 in the evening. Please pray, we're going to do rescue operation. Okay, I said. At 4:30 in the morning, they'll text back. Thank you for the prayers. We were able to rescue 20, 30, 40, all those things. And also, prayer is important for survivors. Because in prayer, they find hope and they can dream again for the future. So the 5th P is prayer. Don't forget.
And finally, Sister Gabriella, where do you personally, you're the coordinator of this worldwide network with some extraordinary examples of progress in the fight against traffickers. Where do you draw hope in this struggle against evil?
Yeah, when I have the opportunity to visit the networks, I'm really blessed because I can touch with my hand and with the experience the beautiful things and the beautiful work that sisters are doing all around the world. Let me take a very personal experience. I will never forget a girl. She was a victim of trafficking for illegal adoption. She suffered a lot. And one day in Amazonia, she told me, sister, when I knew that there was a network against trafficking, and she came to me because I was also there in charge for the network, she told, I realized that I was not abandoned by God, that someone take care on me. So when we are able to give hope to one person, we are renewing the hope for everybody. And I think that it is the most important experience of Talitha Kum. We are not one pot without this very individual experience, like we have heard of blessing Sister Rita. We have thousands of Sister Rita around the world, and more than 1,000 of blessing, as Sister Cecilia was an experience. So I think that it is what is taking me yet in Rome, struggling to improve this collaborative effort of religious women against trafficking.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you to all 3 of you. We do have just over 10 minutes left now to open up for questions from the floor. Could I ask you please to give us your name, your organization, and can I ask you also to keep the questions brief? I'm sure there may be many people who would like to offer a comment or ask a question to any of our panelists today, so please, as short, as concise as possible. Yes, first question over there.
Yeah, good morning. I am retired General Godwin George Moore, the Nigerian ambassador to the Holy See. I want to thank my fellow ambassador for inviting me to this very exciting symposium. Mine is not actually a question, but I would like to make a few contributions. First and foremost, my position on issues of trafficking is that there is a demand somewhere requiring some supply. So if we want to cut off the supply, we have to make sure that the demand is also cut off. Number two, some of the efforts put in addressing this problem has always been on the effects rather than the cause. So, happily, a few of the causes for this human trafficking have been identified. However, there are a couple of them that have not been identified, and if they are not identified, then it becomes difficult to address. For instance, the issue of peer group pressure has so many dimensions. In the particular scenario that Blessing is trying to paint, she happens to be from my country, and I'm very conversant with the region she's actually talking about, is that parents, not just relations, when they see trafficked persons who had actually now become survivors, as you have said, some of them come back with some money that they now do one or two things, and this becomes like a flagstaff to others whose parents will now say, look at the so person's child, look at what she's been able to do. So why are you sitting down here? You go ahead and join them.
Thank you. Perhaps I can ask Blessing to respond to that. Looking at the root causes, in particular this question of peer pressure, what do you think can be done to tackle that, just very briefly?
Then what can be done is probably education. Education in the school, and also educating the parents about the effect of human trafficking on their children. Because what he said, actually, I can say that it is true, because there are some parents that actually give their children out to be trafficked. But we can also relate that to high birth rates. Because you talk about a family where there are 12 children from just one mother. Most men are not actually concerned about their children. Then these women, they are forced to give out their children to anyone that comes to convince them of a better life for their children. I believe that every mother wants a better life for his or her child. Then I believe that the birth rates also need to be controlled, and also educated, mostly the mothers, because it happens a day that I went to a hospital to mediate for one girl. Then the girl was crying because she ran away from her exploiter. Then she made me to call her mother, but her mother did not believe me. And her mother did not believe her daughter as well, because her mother so much trusted her trafficker, the lady that trafficked her daughter, and said that woman can't do such to her daughter. Then she refused to believe me. Then you see trust, educated them, especially in the rural communities, and also educated them in everything, also pertaining to birth rate.
Thank you very much. Other questions? Perhaps we could take a couple. Yes, one over here. Okay, yep, please. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Janusz Kotański, Polish ambassador to the Holy See. Thank you very much, Sister Cecilia Spenilla, for mentioning cyber pedophilia, which in my eyes is a most horrible and devilish crime. There are more than 4 million of pedophiles which are now trying to change our attitude towards pedophilia. They are openly saying that it's kind of a good love towards the children. There is an associazione matter, Italians know it very well, but not everyone else, I suppose. And associazione matter with Don Fortunato Di Noto from Noto in Sicily is fighting for 25 years against the cyber pedophilia. And I think that's the most important things in nowadays. Thank you, sister, for mentioning those absolutely defenseless kids. I will tell you just one story. There was a girl, she was bought before she was being born, and she's been raped just after being born. It was filmed, and it is sold now, yeah? Just an example. When I've heard that story, I said to myself, I must do something. And we've managed to arrange a meeting, and then there is a cooperation between the Polish police and Associazione di Matter. I can advise everyone to do it. It's really very fruitful. Thank you very much.
Indeed, very shocking stories. They're difficult to listen to. Sister, would you like to respond to comment at all on that? And what else can be done, perhaps, to tackle this problem?
We actually call this OSEC, online sexual trafficking of children, and it's not very common. One of the strongest push factor in this is poverty. I've seen mothers who themselves bring their children for pornography and cyber sex because of money. In some places, for example, in Cambodia, their children are out there being prostituted, 13, 12, and where are the parents? Playing cards. You know, these are things, but and it's important that the government should really do something, especially in poverty. For unless this poverty is there, it's a strong, the demand side is there. There are people who would like to see pedophiles now, would like to see even children naked in videos. And because of poverty, it's the demand and supply. It's actually what is working now in human trafficking, this business cycle. Because people are now treated as business for profit. So have become commodities for sale, for profit. But the victims are children, my God. I've seen one 5 years old, and they told me, her laceration is 3 a.m. And I said, what? She was touched at 3 o'clock in the morning? No, sister, the laceration is 3 a.m. And they said the laceration is like that, whatever that means. And she was just 5 years old, you know. So innocent. We can talk about that, but that's all. The government has to do something. And another problem with human trafficking is conviction is low. I was there at the United Nations in Vienna, and they themselves admitted convictions in trafficking is low. In fact, we were proposing that for convictions, for those who profited because of human trafficking, get all their business so that it's zero. That's the way to counter human trafficking on the demand side. Whatever it is that becomes a source of wealth from them when they are convicted, get all of them, so that this will not be repeated by other people, because this is simply profit.
A couple of questions from the men we've had. Any of the women like to, or any of the sisters indeed, like to comment on or ask questions to any of our panelists? Yes, at the back there. Is there a question? No. Okay, here. Yeah.
Sister Daruciak, I think my question is really to Sister Espinella. How can you help children? We do have some in our orphanage in Armenia who have been trafficked and who have been freed. Something that the authorities are completely denying that this exists where we are working. And I have tried to also speak to the directors of the schools if they would inform the students about what is happening outside. And it is complete denial. Can you advise of something that we could do to create awareness? Because even the relatives of the children that we have, they don't want to hear about it. They said, don't say anything to anybody because we don't want anyone to know about it.
Sisters, you really have to do something about this. I wonder why they are denying. I don't know if they are involved. But talk to the government so that the government can ask the school to open. Because you're not putting something. You're not just simply talking about sexual matters. You are talking about human dignity. This is a human right of the children to know about human trafficking. They have the right to know. We also go to poor communities, especially the parents. I do human trafficking talks to them, and sometimes I'm afraid I don't know if I'll be going out alive. You know, you don't know where traffickers are. But please, don't surrender, sister. Don't surrender. We will help you with Sister Gabriela if they will not accept you. We will go there with Ambassador.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Sister, I would like to share with you my experience when I arrived in Rondônia, in Brazil. That was the same. They said, why you came here, sister? We do not have trafficking in this region. So the first thing, and it's not only me, but it is the knowledge of Talita Kum, is not to start to face directly the government, is not to face directly the reality. First, we have to collect information through news in the newspaper, if you are able to find something, to get in touch with NGOs, human rights organizations. First of all, you have to understand who is still working in the work. Do not start alone. That's not the mentality of Talita Kum, but try to understand what is going on. Because and again, more the trafficking is strong, more the people has difficulties on speaking on it. And also because there are crime organizations working, people are threatened. So we have a methodology of Talita Kum, then we can speak more about it, but it's not to face directly the government. It is first to build a safe network for you.
Thank you very much indeed. And that's actually all we've got time for this first panel discussion. My timekeeper here has been keeping a close eye on all of us. So thank you for keeping within the time allowment that we had. Just like to ask all of you to please thank our three speakers today.
Wow, was that a powerful panel or what? Human trafficking and modern slavery is not an easy topic. It's something that the sisters work on every day. And as a mother of two daughters, my oldest is almost 3, my youngest is 11 months, I honestly can't imagine having to deal with that on a daily basis. I'm sorry. And I'm really glad to know that the sisters are out there working every day on this issue so that my daughters are safe and other people's daughters are safe too. Wow. Women and children are not for sale. Women and children are not second-class citizens. And I think that the words of this panel are very powerful. And I think also, too, that you have to find hope in the darkness. And there is progress. Blessing talked about some of the traditional rulers that are working in Nigeria to help combat the issue. Sister Cecilia talked about the power of the big P. And I like something that Sister Gabriela said very much, that when we give hope to one person, we are renewing hope for everyone. And I think all of us here in this room can do something. And I think that's what this panel is all about. So if you can please give a hand to our panelists again. Thank you.